Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review slash knife overview to share with you guys. This is the new Riot Exo M in aluminum and Nitro V, or as people have been referring to it, the budget Exo M. It is, in fact, much less expensive than the titanium version, right? We've got a lot of different versions of the Exo now, but this is a Blade HQ exclusive currently, right? One here is a two-tone Tanto with a blue frame. They also came in black. For those, I know people are going to complain about this color setup. They also came in black, and they came in a drop point configuration, two-tone or not two-tone, right? So there were a bunch of them. There's going to be more. I don't know how often they will restock them, but there will definitely be more of them at Blade HQ, and hopefully more aluminum and Nitro V variants that are less expensive in general. Why was this set up like this initially? Why did we have one up in the upper right and up corner and one in the lower left? Well, my camera absolutely hates the blue of this Exo M. And you're going to see throughout the video that it's going to have trouble periodically focusing. I've tried different combinations of backgrounds. I have tried different locations in my house, and it simply does not like the blue of this knife, which is so weird, but it's such a great looking blue. I don't know what is causing the problem. This titanium Exo will be in the shot. It seems to have a much easier time when it has another object to focus on that's not so vibrant. So given that this is relative for comparison, it'll be in the shot the entire time. Try to keep the camera from constantly trying to focus. Thank you so much to Blade HQ for providing this knife for review. Thanks to my patrons for supporting me. These knives in all variations will be linked down in the description so that you can check them out if you want to. Let's see if we can get it to stay. Oh boy, we're going to do it. Okay, good deal. Let's measure the Exo M. It's exactly the same as the titanium version, 7.65 inches overall, roughly. Blade length is coming in at about 3 1/4. Cutting edge is about 3 1/16. I will say this right off the bat. This is a gravity knife. Factually, legally, this is a gravity knife. So, if you live outside the United States, good luck. Chances are you can't carry this, and that sucks. And I feel bad for you. I really do. I'm not being sarcastic. If you live inside the United States, you need to check your local laws. You really do, because these can get you in a lot of trouble. I live in Kansas. They don't care. They don't care if I own this. They don't care if I carry it. If I had it my way, every state would be, all over the world would be like, you know, hey, good to go, carry it. But unfortunately, we've got a lot of different people who have a lot of different feelings. Oh, feelings about knives, right? And that, unfortunately, dictates the laws in certain areas. So, yeah, seriously, check your local laws. Because regardless of your feelings, you can get in a lot of trouble for carrying stuff like this. So, yeah, it would definitely be better if the laws weren't stupid. I agree, but let's go ahead and move past that. So, size comparisons up against the Exo M. This is the medium-sized one. They also have a small one, right? They also have a large one. And then they also have, like, the Exo U, like the smaller one with the utility blade. I feel like the one that's probably the most popular for general EDC and for, you know, just people like knife enthusiasts wanting to carry something that's not necessarily any more utilitarian than your average pocket knife, but definitely more interesting. This is probably the one that gets picked up the most. It's essentially the same size. Curiously, for this first version, Blade HQ did not offer a dagger or bayonet style blade. That was a missed opportunity in my book, and the reason is because the only way that you can truly safely house a double-edged blade is on a knife that is an OTF, and this is considered, you know, a variation of OTF. It's not an automatic knife, but OTF means out the front, which is absolutely how this deploys. That's why I loved carrying my titanium one so much, is because it had 2 edges. Not the best cutting geometry for what I was doing, but it did have 2 edges. So, you know, it lasted a really long time before I had to sharpen it. I hope they reconsider that in the future when they almost inevitably make lots more aluminum versions of this knife. let's go ahead and find out if the camera is going to work with us today. And let's put it up against some knives that we're all substantially more familiar with, maybe. Actually, I feel like a lot of us are familiar with the EXO M. So, any custom scales in this section can be found down in the description under Original Goat and others. Up against the 80-10 and the 80-20.5, obviously, right around the same length. Since this is the same size as the standard EXO M, you guys are probably familiar, generally speaking, with the size. Even if you've not handled it, you've probably seen channels like mine compare it endlessly, because, I mean, everybody's talked about this knife, right? Very similar to the overall size of the Para 3, though it does have substantially more cutting edge. And then finally, let's put it up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue and the Hogue Deca. How's the action of this knife? Well, it's the Reate Exo, and aside from like a couple of other, I have to get this one back out here. Aside from a couple other existing, see what I mean? Just the camera's like, I don't like it. A couple other existing gravity knives, right? Very few of them are, interesting or high quality like the Exo, but like the Reate RT Swordfish is a good example. There's not really a lot to compare to in terms of quality of action, because the idea of a gravity knife was they existed, but like modern quality variations of them didn't really exist. And then the Exo came along, and all of a sudden it was really, really interesting. A lot of people kind of write these off as being like gimmicky or like fidgety toys, and the truth is no, they're actually incredibly functional and utilitarian because of the way that they lock up and operate. Right, you use gravity to deploy the blade, and the blade slides, sort of on this chassis, I guess is what we're going to call it. Slides up, this little pill-shaped piece of steel, probably. I don't think it's titanium on either of them, but it gets caged completely within, the frame. The older versions of this knife did not have a lock, which was weird. They decided to go ahead and start putting the lock on the knife, which definitely made it a lot more. It was not only user friendly because it wasn't, but it was also safe, right? Safe and reliable, and honestly a really strong locking system. A lot of people, didn't like that there was an extra step. Truthfully, this is so easy to manipulate. I carried this guy for so long, I just got really used to it. And this new one with the magnetic sliding lock, honestly, it's even a little easier. Now, these do feel a little bit different because the aluminum is obviously lighter than the titanium, and you'll definitely be aware of that. But I don't feel like the quality it doesn't feel lower in quality. It just feels lighter weight. Truthfully, I kind of like this one. It feels more balanced. It feels, obviously, because you got less weight in the handle, but it is more balanced. It just feels more like a tool, and this feels like a tool, but it just more like a fancy. It's exactly what you'd think. This is the fancy one that's titanium and 3V or LMAX or whatever, and this is the less fancy one that's much more like a tool. I think the combination of that, knowing that you spent less money on it, the fact that it's lighter weight and more balanced, it's aluminum, right? And the lock being a little bit better, right? That magnetic sort of sliding lock. I feel like I kind of like the action of this one better. You do hear it. It's very noisy, right? So if you're sneaking up on your adversary, right? If you're doing like Black Ops, if you're like Metal Complex, listen, I do Black Ops, special level 9000 Black Ops. And when I'm approaching an adversary, right? When I find myself in the shadows, and I am personally very silent. I'm a silent professional. I do not make noise. And when my tools of the trade are noisy, inherently, that's just a no-go for me. Well, then this isn't going to work for you, Black Ops guy. But for everybody else who lives on planet Earth, both physically and mentally, I don't think that'll matter very much, right? What if we're hunting deer? We're sneaking up on the deer and we're going to jump out of the trees and stab him right in the back. Well, yeah, you're probably going to scare the deer. A number of ways before the sound of your knife. Some people just don't like realistically, I think it's a totally justified complaint. Like if you just don't like noisy knives, right? It turns out, I remember reading a study on that. That's like genetic, right? If like certain sounds of material sliding against each other, it's chewing as well. Like my wife is very aware. She can hear me chewing even if my mouth is closed. And that's not a sound that even registers in my brain, whether it's me or somebody else. So some people are just more prone to it, genetically prone to it than others. But yeah, definitely a preference thing. So if you don't like the sound of metal sliding on metal, these both sound essentially the same. This one might have a slightly lower tone, but it's definitely noisy. You're going to hear that, right? Other people have complained, a couple of people have complained that this switch, this one in particular, disengages in their pocket. I read that 2 times, and I think it's worth reporting on. Personally, I did not experience that. I've carried this for about 4 days straight now, using it quite often, most recently to sharpen my son's, what color is that? Orange? Yeah, it was an orange colored pencil. But I have not experienced that thing disengaging in my pocket. So I would like to hear if you've been carrying this version or another version, right? Because the Exo U's and the small ones with this similar lock have been out for a bit. I would like to hear if other people are having that experience. I have not. I feel like the magnets are substantial. I mean, you can see there, like, it's taking a decent amount of deliberate force to switch that over. It's not loosey-goosey or anything like that. Roughly the same amount of force as this guy. So the action is completely and totally unique, or for the most part, completely and totally unique. I personally like this one a little bit better than this guy, just mainly because it's lighter weight. And it's like you get all that cool factor and that fidget factor. And that, honestly, the ease of manipulation, because, again, this is actually really simple to just deploy and use and then put back away. Like, it's so simple. You get all of that for less money, so you don't have to worry about it as much, right? I really appreciate that. Carry profile, thickness up against this particle pair 3, it's about the same. Length and height up against the PM2 and pair 3. This is a really easy knife to carry because it is just a block of aluminum, like a fairly, it's not a super thick or super thin block of aluminum. But the size of the object, it's just, you know, it's the shape of a simple tool. The type of tool that you would carry in your pocket, right? So it carries really easily, just like you would think. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check. I'm going to get out my tools. Sorry, let me bring out this other one again just to keep the camera from doing its weird thing. Get out my tools. As per usual, my tools are very inexpensive and very recommendable. You can find them right down in the section of my description that talks about the tools I use on this channel. I don't know, you know, obviously this one has an inlay, but as far as like, you know, the screw size, like the old one back here was T8 for the pocket clip and for that weird like secondary hinge pivot thing. I believe that that is still the case. I mean, we have a screw for the switch itself, but no screws here because there are no inlays on this version. As far as the little tab that locks the blade, it is... Does it even come out on the other version? I just realized. It must. Yeah, right there. Okay, so the old ones were T8, and the new ones are also T8. The pocket clip / pivot, secondary pivot screw back here is T8. I say secondary, it is the pivot screw. That's where it pivots. And it's the same on the other side. One huge upgrade from this one to this one. Now, I don't know if they changed this more recently and I just didn't realize it. Sorry, there goes the camera again. This has an ambidextrous, this has ambidextrous mounting positions for the pocket clip. The pocket clip can absolutely be switched over to the other side because this is now a filler tab. Whereas on this version, at least my version, which was from 2023, so they would have had to change it fairly recently, does not have that. It's simply only over here, right? The pocket clip itself looks to be fairly similar, a little bit different, right? But essentially the same thing. But now lefties can enjoy this, which was really great. That's a smart move, right? In any case, if you want to take this apart, it's going to be really, really simple. It looks like T8 across the board. Nothing hyper complicated there. I mean, it's going to be a little bit different than your standard pocket knife, but if you want to take that apart, you can. Just make sure that you have the right tools for the job and you should be good to go. Truthfully, though, I'm going to tell you, I've never had to take mine apart, and I think just by opening up the frame, you have so much access to everything that you could possibly need to clean that there's just no reason. Unless you're that type of person who's like, every knife I buy, I have to take it apart completely for, I don't know why, but some people do that, right? If you do, you can. I would advise against it. Simply unsheathing the thing will give you access to whatever it is that you need. So there you go. Let's go ahead and weigh them both so that you know the difference between the two here. So your original titanium Exo M is going to come in at 4.1 ounces. Your aluminum version comes in a substantial, like almost an ounce less, 3.3 ounces. That is noticeable, especially considering the balance point on this titanium one is quite a ways back from what I would call the middle of the knife. Whereas on the aluminum one, the balance, because the weight is different, is quite a bit closer. It's not like a crazy amount, but it's quite a bit closer. And it's also lighter weight. So this feels a lot more, it's like a really fun beater. The suggestiveness of that, term is not good. But yeah, like that's what it feels like to me. So anyways, let's move on here because this is pretty much what you'd think. It is a substantially less expensive version of this knife. I think these guys are still $280, $290. Now they now have the big ones with the locks. This is the medium one. They got a big one, right? And they've worked with 3V. They've worked with LMAX, probably 20 CV. I'm sure there's 20 CV variation of that in there. This is aluminum and Nitro V. Now, there's nothing we can do about it. You're going to get some people who will blatantly ignore the fact that the construction on this thing is quite a bit more complicated than your typical budget folding knives. So, regardless of what this is, what they will see is aluminum and Nitro V. They will immediately point out that companies like Civivi sell knives in aluminum and Nitro V for right around $70. So why doesn't the Riate Exo M in aluminum and Nitro V cost $70? Why doesn't this knife, that is substantially more complicated, with more complicated parts, cost the same? I mean, it should be pretty obvious, right? But I guess for some people it's not. This is a Riate built knife, and I've always maintained that I thought it was really impressive that they managed to make this for less than $300. Riate oftentimes will make knives, admittedly, they tend to be a lot more complicated, or they have fancier machine work or inlays or whatever. A lot of times Riate knives end up at $400 or even $500, right? Sometimes for, like I said, more complicated stuff. Sometimes it's because it's a giant knife. There's a lot more material, like the T1000, right? But I'm always impressed that Riate is able to do stuff like this periodically because, like, one way or another, this is a lot. Like in this case, this is a lot of titanium to mill and to make sure everything fits together properly, right? A lot of people want to ask about the rattle. Is it still present? Yeah, it is. If you grip it and wiggle it, almost nothing. There's still a little tiny bit of movement sometimes, but while you're gripping it, not so much, right? So if that bothers you, right? If you want to know about blade play, when you're not gripping it, yeah, there's a little bit. But again, like if that safety's there, this is pretty substantial. That thing's locked out, right? It's not going anywhere. It's not like blade play on a liner lock or something that relies more heavily on geometry. It's nowhere near the same thing as like a plunge lock. I mean, this thing is locked out all the way around on two different sides of the knife. I would say this is quite a bit more substantial than your standard locking systems. No, not as strong as the triad lock, but definitely more lock than you'll need for what you'll be using it for. Unless you're trying to pry with it, which don't do that. Just don't do that. That's dumb. But yeah, blade play, minimal. About the same while you're squeezing it, about the same as like a Microtech OTF. A little more if you're not squeezing it, right? So you have to ask yourself, how much does that bother you? Won't affect you. I mean, during use, it's more than enough to keep the blade in place during use, as long as you don't disengage the safety. Yeah, the price that they got this down to, $129 for the aluminum and Nitro V version. I'm okay with that. Could they have been a little bit lower? I guess, but like, what else exists? I mean, they definitely could have charged more for this, and people would have bought it. Why? Because we don't have sub $200 gravity knives. It doesn't matter what, we just don't have them, especially ones that are made really well. I mean, people probably could point to some weird, like, rogue nothing brands making some obscure gravity-esque knives. Sure. Do we have anything that's like legitimate quality, like Riate? No. So Riate probably could have gotten away with charging us more, and that would have been frustrating, but people still would have bought it. You guys know I'm right. They could have charged $160 for this, and people would have bought it. So $129, is that a fair price for this? I think it's fair. I think they definitely, it's like how I've always said, anything could be $20 less, sure. But I'm not upset about it. I think it's pretty appropriate. Nitro V is a good steel, right? It's certainly not like an ultra premium steel, but it's, definitely a steel that people, consider, again, I'm not reducing this to edge retention alone. It's a multi-directional teeter-totter of properties, how you're going to use it. I mean, there's an infinite number of variables, right? But as far as how expensive the steel is and how premium the balance of composition is in terms of Nitro V, it's definitely going to be a more expensive steel than something like HCR 13 MOV, right? Or something that definitely belongs in the budget territory. So as far as the steels they could have chosen to hit that $130 mark, which oftentimes is 154 cm, Nitro V, we see VG10 there, right? There's a number of other steels that we might, N690. I'm not upset at all about Nitro V. I think it's just fine. It's not going to win any awards in terms of edge retention, but it's plenty tough. I don't think it is. You know what? I'll ask you guys, is Nitro V a stainless steel? Is it? That's one of those really confusing steels. I'm honestly not sure, right? But on this channel, I'm a design reviewer, right? So that's mainly what I'm going to speak on. As far as how Nitro V performs, it performs a lot like, in my, opinion, in my, experience, it performs a lot like the other steels that I just named off, specifically 154 cm and VG10. It feels almost the same, right? I mean, obviously geometry is going to play a bigger role in that. Personally, I would have not chosen the Tanto blade, but I didn't get to pick, so I'm okay with that. The two-tone's not also really my thing. I would have chosen blue with a plain drop point or black with a plain drop point. I think they missed the mark here with not offering a double-edged blade, but I feel like they probably will in the future. I very much doubt that Blade HQ is done doing exclusive versions of the Exo M. And I doubt that Riot is going to limit the availability of the aluminum and Nitro V Exo M to Blade HQ. If I thought that they weren't going to do this, I would say you guys definitely need to make this in every color of the rainbow, in every blade shape you could possibly imagine, and you need to do them in different colored Cerakote and this. But I feel like they will. Maybe not the different colored blades, but I mean, because they slide, right? But, and that's probably why we got the two-tone, honestly. Yeah, I think as many different blade shapes as you can come up with, and as many different colors of aluminum as you can come up with, even offering different inlay colors, right? Like aluminum and different colors of G10 for the inlay, or even different colors of aluminum, just kind of like how they mixed it up on the XOU. Obviously, that would be a really great idea. As long as they keep it at that 130, that's kind of like, it's not, oh my gosh, blow my mind, it's like the best deal in the world, but it's not like, oh my gosh, that's incredibly unfair. Who do they think they are? Cough James Brand, cough Benchmade, right? Like, it's not that. I think the price is fine. Ergonomics, they're the same as, the standard one. The pocket clip is nice and short, so it doesn't go into your hand. The benefit to having a single edge on a knife like this is that you can actually put your thumb up here. On this, with the double edge, you cannot put your thumb up here because it's got two sharpened edges. So that's one of those things where you're going to have, it'd be nice to have the option. The texturing back here is okay, a little bit slippery versus the titanium one. It's like knurling back here, I thought was a lot better. But truthfully, I just really enjoyed carrying this one for the same reason I enjoyed carrying this one. It was just easier to carry. The switch was a little more organic to manipulate. And I got the same joy out of it. I will always maintain the opinion that the XOU is far less a fidgety toy than some people label it. It is far more of a capable tool than a lot of people give it credit for. And I'm not saying everybody. There are plenty of you out there who know that it is really great. But some people just exclusively label this thing as a toy, and it's not. It's really well thought out. And, by the way, you got to give the designer credit here. I mean, most people know, but the Exoskeleton company, like the brand name, that's the people behind the design. And it's really cool. Like, this is a good idea, right? Making a budget version of this knife is a good idea. And like everybody, I feel like at this point, everybody who really wants a titanium Exo for EDC, like most people who wanted one have one, because we still see these floating around now, right? So it breathes life into this And there's a reason, like, you know, if Blade HQ had not sent me one of these, I would have bought one. I'll just tell you straight up. I would have just bought one. I think it's cool. You guys got to do a budget large one and a budget small one too, though, for sure. And I feel like they probably know that, right? But man, like, I'd love to get one in like a neon green. You know, with a double edge. Like, I would absolutely love, or like red. I would think that was so cool. And having like the different color options for the pocket clip, or, you know, the switch here again, like they do on the EXO U. I love that. I love like the bright, that I have the option for the bright and colorful stuff. Or raw aluminum with a red switch or a blue switch. I think that would be really, really cool. This is a semi-affordable knife. It's not a budget knife, right? So when people say budget EXO M, people always jump up and say it's not budget because it has to be under X amount. A lot of people say under 75. Why? Because on my channel, anything that's under 75 is budget. It's not a universal thing. It's just what I say. So on this channel, I wouldn't consider this a budget knife, but reasonably affordable for what it is. If it's legal to carry this knife in your area, not just own, but carry in your area, do I recommend this? Yeah, not only for people who, this is one of those weird knives that's like interesting to collectors, definitely interesting to knife enthusiasts, but also to people who use their knives. This is one of those really cool kind of trifecta knives that is going to appeal to a lot of people. And the cherry on top is that this version is way less expensive, right? And has the potential to be much more sort of catered to the individual, considering that aluminum can be anodized pretty much any color. So yeah, I love this. I think it's incredibly cool. I'm going to put it on my favorite knives of all time playlist, and also my most recommended knives playlist. Legitimately, I love this, and I'm going to keep this one. And I know that that's a little selfish because I could give it away. Most of the stuff that comes in for free, I give away, but I'm going to keep this because I legitimately enjoy carrying it more than my titanium version. I just think this is what it was meant to be. This form is, in my opinion, what it was truly meant to be, which is more of a daily user beater kind of thing, you know? So that's going to be pretty much it. Great knife. Love it. Hope that they expand on the different options, because that would be super smart. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex, and I don't know where my card went, but also on TikTok at _metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.